Alright, cool. So this is just going to be a very short video on a brief breakdown of yesterday's PA on GU. I took 2 trades and it gave me a total return of 16R, not including commissions. And I just decided to make this video to kind of like showcase to you what POI I chose and why I chose it. And honestly, at first I thought that the POI that I chose to trade from really wasn't a good POI, but I asked Tricky and I asked Mansa, and they were like, it's a pretty good POI, so that kind of boosted my confidence and I felt pretty happy about it, So yeah. I also noticed how in my previous video it wasn't a very good viewing experience because of how much I stuttered and how bad my accent was. I spoke too quick, I mushed up my words. So in this video, I'm just going to talk slower and just not stutter, hopefully, and just speak clearer because it was a pretty bad and shitty viewing experience for the people that watched the video. So yeah, let's just get into it. So every day I do like a top-down analysis from like daily to the H4 to M15. I do that every morning in my journal as well. So yeah, let's just get into it from the daily. I started just now too, Jesus Christ. Anyway, so we are pretty bearish on the H4. I mean the daily, right? We're making lower lows and lower highs, respecting this kind of supply control over the market. So without a doubt, we are bearish on the daily, right? However, looking at current PA, what we can see is we have this kind of like this demand right here that gave us the push up. All right, now we came into that demand. Let me just take this. We had this kind of tap, the initial reaction, and then we had that sweep of the initial reaction and then the failure of demand, right? So hold on. So this looks a lot clearer on the H4, so let's just like drop down to the H4. So the daily actually did not make a new low before it had a pullback. So at this point of time, this high was yet to make a new low. So essentially, currently, this high is what we call a weak high, which we expect it to be run as liquidity or something of that matter, where weak low and weak high structure, stuff like that. So going down to the H4, what we saw was that clearer tap. I mean, it barely tapped it. I mean, if you took the whole candle, we did have a tap right here. I actually refined it to this H4 candle, where I just kind of like took the close and the low of that bullish candle, because this is essentially the last down move before the up move that created a new high in substructure or internal structure, as you want to call it. So that's what I saw. Oh, what's that? Oh shit. So reaction liquidated, demand failed. Important because we had a reaction to it, which means there was a transaction of orders in this zone right here, and ultimately demand failed. So supply swing control. However, we just took out a significant level of daily / H4 demand, right? So whenever we take out a really important level, we kind of expect a form of pullback, right? So at this point of time, it was pulling back. When was this? This was 6 a.m. I came to trust like 9 a.m. because I have class. But there are a few other levels I want to mark out here too. Mainly this supply right here. Damn, I keep kicking the wrong one. But this supply right here, this H4 supply, this wick, I marked it up too. And some other levels which I also did mark up was this demand right here. I think it was the H4 demand. Yeah, I marked it up. I took like the open and the low, this demand. So essentially this demand failed, but we have a reaction to it, right? We had a reaction, price came up, swept some liquidity over here before tanking. So this was an important level as well. We had a reaction which caused liquidation of some levels in some areas before the ultimate failure. and the levels were somewhere here. This buy to sell wicks, which was the ultimate final point of bullish movement before the failure. So this is what I took. I refined it downwards. Let me just go down to 2 and 15. Yep, I refined it downwards to this final candle, this buy to sell, because it took out liquidity and then it dumped. So yeah, so daily bearish. Where's my level? Daily bearish. H4 is also bearish. However, we did see break of important demand and we're seeing a pullback. So intraday we could be seeing longs in play. Just because the daily is bearish doesn't mean that we can't be playing a counter trend in intraday trades, right? Because that's what I trade. So let me just mark up some stuff. At the same time, we also did see some kind of supply chain right here. Kind of supply chain, I mean, like, it's not really that obvious to some, but this was a supply chain because we were respecting supply chain mitigation, and then broke demand, mitigation, and then reaction, and ultimately the reaction failed. So this, like, people count this as a mitigation, and honestly it did count as a mitigation, but just know that a level may be mitigated more than once. In fact, it may also be mitigated to the last tick and then still hold. So just keep that in mind. Like, one mitigation doesn't really mean anything. So just keep that in mind. But basically what this supply chain was doing was it was building liquidity up top, buy side liquidity. So once we took out that demand, we saw a pullback, and then eventually we saw a failure of supply chain, and then the buy side liquidity got swept. So following that, we also saw this H4 level that we marked up just now, this H4 right here. This week we saw it fail, and it was important because we also did see a reaction to it. So we had a reaction which showed a transaction between supply and demand, which meant that this was a pretty significant level, and then we saw a failure of it. Alright, so this is when I came to the charts around 9 something. Alright, so at this point of time, I had a few levels in mind. My first level was this level, this demand on the M15 right here, and then I was seeing liquidity being built during Asia, because this was Asia session. So this POI had inducement above it, right? And this is essentially the last bearish candle before the move upwards. Like, you can maybe say that this is also the last bearish move before the push upwards, but it wasn't really high probability because this was basically it was just really sketchy, and then this was more probable. Looking at it, I mean, like, look at it, it was really obvious, and now it has inducement above it. So at this point in time, I was like, alright, this is a pretty good POI, let's see how it goes. Oh, my bad, I just ate pizza, so I'm kind of like full right now, shit. But this is the POI that I was looking at going into the day, in my outlook as well, in my journal. So I was looking at this and I was like, this is a pretty good POI to go longs from. Longs till where? To this level, this buy to sell that took out demand right here. So I was like, alright, pretty good level, let's see how it goes. So let me just play this real quick throughout the day. Let's see where what's this? This is 3 p.m. Alright, so let me just take out the Asia highs and lows. So this was pre-London, and then this was the Asia highs, this was the Asia lows, right? So we were literally beneath an Asia low. However, this POI was not the POI I traded from. No, it wasn't. Alright, the POI that I traded from was actually this POI right here, this demand and 15 demand, and I took it because this was essentially the last level that swept liquidity right here. Yeah, swept liquidity, and then we took out these highs right here. So I mean, yeah, you could say that this is also one, but then I mean, compared to this this is less. It was priced not as good as the one below it, which is why I didn't take this one. And I also saw that this level had inducement above it, something like this. So I was like, alright, so if this fails, I can just trade this, which is also directly below an Asia low. And that's a confluence, because like you'll notice that price likes to sweep Asia lows and Asia highs, come into London, so that's just an extra confluence. But really, I was looking to trade at this level. It looked pretty good to me. It was when volume started to kick in a bit, I'd say. Took out these highs and took out a high to make a new higher high structurally, I mean internal structure wise, even though it was just a wick. So we had this POI with inducement, which kind of broke structure above it, so it was looking pretty good. So coming to this, I actually had a limit placed on the 50% because I chose to put it because it was, I could have gone like a 3.5 pip stop with it, yeah, which is like kind of my sweet spot. A 3.5 limit on it. I put a limit there, and then I just forgot about it. And then once it tapped here, it set inducement. So I was looking for an entry model essentially. So this was the initial tap. My alert played out, and I was waiting for it to give me a valid entry model, which is chalk, flip, and stuff like that. So let's just see how it plays out. Just play it right here. Like all of this, it wasn't really clear. There was no clear entry model, there was no chalk, there was no flip. And then this was actually that flip, I'd say, but the flip would be down here. And I was like, I wanted to like liquidate this one first. Yeah, I mean, even though it did take inducement in its initial reaction, there was no valid entry model, so I just kind of like ignored it, right? Because if it tapped here, and then it gave me a valid entry model, I would have entered somewhere in this mess. But because it didn't, so I didn't enter on it. So yeah, so it eventually came back down to tap me in on my first trade. I actually was thinking of like making both trades like 0.5, but then I actually forgot. So yeah, so it is what it is. So I got tapped in right here on my first limit. Let's just track that first limit right here, and then my alert went off, so we saw another sweep of the initial reaction, which is really good. So at that point of time, I saw the sweep, and then I also saw this 1M supply. However, what worried me was that this 1M supply didn't have a reaction to before it fell. So what I did was I actually just extended the level by a bit to see how it would hold, and then eventually it gave a reaction to. So I was like, all right, we have a reaction to it. All right, pretty cool. So I just waited to, I sent an alert here to see if it fell, and once it did, I came back to the charts, and I was in a rush actually, because this is like 4:54 p.m. for me. So I was actually playing Valorant with my friends. I was dead in the round, so I could come to the charts to check on the alert. Normally I wouldn't though, but this is the demand that ultimately flipped the supply right here. It failed, and we have a close above, so this is a more prominent break. So I just, without a second thought, I just placed a limit. I think it was 3.7 pips. Yep. I just set a limit there. Thankfully there was no slippage, because sometimes there would be slippage, but it didn't happen, so thank God. And it came back down to, yeah, to tie me in. Another trade you could have taken was this one right here, because essentially this was the demand that took out supply right here. So ultimately it did get tapped, but I didn't do it, so I wasn't on the charts at the time. I was playing Valorant clutching rounds. So I'm just kidding. But yeah, so it went to great profits. Once it got to like 10, once it broke this high, essentially. Where's my? Once it broke that high, my trades were BE. Both trades were BE because this was essentially the catalyst that took me to my entry. And once I got taken out, I just put my trade to break even. I actually considered this level as well right here, but I was like, nah. You know, I was like, I'm good. I mean, this does seem pretty aggressive actually, now that I think about it. But then at that time, I was like, you know, it's alright. You know, it's Gucci basically. It's cool. So yeah, we got to 10R somewhere, and then I closed 80% volume because that's kind of like my rule set right now. But yeah, eventually I got taken out at BE though, like in New York. So it was only a 16-hour trade, which is not that bad. I'm gonna be honest with you, it wasn't that bad of a trade. Maybe I should have taken more. I'm gonna be honest with you, maybe I should have, but I didn't. So it is what it is. Eventually, yeah, the AGI lows got swept right here, and then bridge momentum kicked in to take out POI. But I don't trade this late into New York. This is like 11 p.m. for me, so yeah. I hope this video helped you in some way. Thanks for watching, I guess, and I'll see you in the next, if there is one. Have a nice day.